that reach through our employee advocacy program if we were to run paid social media campaigns of the same level. And for 2025, it was £500,000 of equivalent advertising spend for the firm. We manage over £250 billion in assets, having our experts confident enough to actually speak their mind publicly, safely, and in a compliant way. For us is the new brand equity. The cost per engagement that we get from our employee activity is also more or less 120% less than our costs on paid social.
Welcome to the Employee Advocacy and Influence podcast. My name's Lewis Gray. My co-host, as always, is Elliot Elsley. And today we're going to be talking about all things employee advocacy within regulated industries. And we are very lucky to have the manager of an award-winning program with us today from Aviva Investors, Beatrice Panariello. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, Lewis and Elliot, for the invite. It's a pleasure for me as well.
Of course, yeah, we're very excited to dive into this one. So, something that I find is always very helpful to do right off the bat is just to give us a high-level overview of your employee advocacy program and that current setup. But I've got a few additional questions. So before we come into that, could you just tell our listeners a little bit about your current role and your experience?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Beatrice Panariello. I'm the Senior Digital Marketing Manager here at Aviva Investors. We are the global asset management of Aviva PLC, which some of you might know. It's the UK's largest insurance company. We manage over £250 billion in assets, and that's across the UK, Europe, APAC, and North America for our institutional and wholesale clients. And our expertise really spans across various asset classes, the likes of equities, fixed income, private markets, multi-asset, and all with a very strong responsible investment ethos. In my role, I lead the acquisition and engagement strategy across a number of digital marketing channels. That includes also social media. I've actually started my career agency side, working in advertising before moving in-house, leading all things international marketing for a fashion house in Italy, which is also the country where I'm from. And then when the war decided to hit a pause, literally, thanks to COVID, I decided I was ready for a change, and I've changed literally everything. I've changed country, moved to the UK for a new job at a new company in a completely different industry, and that's where I discovered B2B financial services marketing, asset management, and of course also employee advocacy. And over the past 6 years, I've built and scaled multinational advocate programs with hundreds of active members globally, and all of that while operating into very tightly regulated environment like asset management is.
What a brilliant story and fantastic background as well. I can't really think of anybody more qualified to speak on these things, to be honest with you, Beatrice. And I'm so fascinated by your journey from influencer marketing to B2B marketing, especially when we're talking in the context of employee influencers and things like that. So, like I said, before we dive into the program, and I've got so many questions for you, could you give us a high-level overview of the employee advocacy program at Aviva Investors currently?
Yeah, sure. So our program has about 185 active participants, and that's roughly 20% penetration of our global employee base. It is heavily weighted towards investment professionals, so the likes of portfolio managers, fund managers, investment directors, investment specialists, but also client-facing teams. And very important to us, our senior leadership and ExCo, including our CEO. Participation of our program is 100% voluntary. I would never mandate anyone to post. That's very important to me. The program launched in the UK back in 2016. I wasn't even here at Aviva Investors at the time, and very shortly expanded into Europe and APAC. And we have recently onboarded our very first team in North America last year, our Canadian team. The baseline is always we do not really want to turn everyone into a loud promoter, but we are here to create for them the conditions, the resources, the safeguards, so that our people, the people that are excited about what Aviva Investors does and what they do in their job can actually speak more naturally, confidently, and consistently where it does matters for our clients the most. So for us, the program runs exclusively on LinkedIn. That's where we know from research, it's where our clients spend most of their time in a business-oriented mindset, where they are sourcing information that actually hate their decision-making process and moves them along their buyer's journey. We have been active with the program on other platforms in the past, but decided for us it was to strategically refocus our efforts to LinkedIn only as of last year. And the program has got some great stats. We have our employee base together has got something like 4 times the reach and the connection base of our LinkedIn corporate account, giving us that potential reach. We had over 4,600 social media posts published in the last months that accounted for 50,000 engagements and more. And our program is also quite cost efficient in the sense that the cost per engagement that we get from our employee activity is also more or less 120% less than our costs on paid social. And another key metric that we're always very excited to share both internally and externally is the earned media value. So the equivalent advertising costs that reach through our employee advocacy program and engagements that we get from the program would represent if we were to run paid social media campaigns of the same level. And for 2025, it was £500,000 of equivalent advertising spend for the firm, all while staying 100% compliant, which is a very key element of the program here at Aviva Investors. So yeah, some very good stats, I'd like to say, even if they are our stats, but yeah, I cannot help but shouting about it.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's very clear to me already, if it wasn't previously, why this is an award-winning program and why you're getting so much internal recognition for this as well. And I definitely want to come to the methods of measurement as well. So hopefully we can tackle that a little bit later on. I mentioned before that you started your career in B2C influencer marketing. You mentioned you were working in that world when you were back in Italy, but what were you able to carry over from that line of work to your employee advocacy work in asset management?
That's a good question. I think that the biggest carryover was that it's actually never about the brand that shouts the loudest, but it's finding about those more authentic voices, and also give them a very clear brief and toolkit that can serve both your business goals as a brand, as a company, but also their own, like the individual's personal brand. So that's definitely one. And then the belief that actually people do not necessarily follow brands, but they do follow people. Truth to be said, in B2C influencer marketing, in fashion marketing, you hire those creators precisely because they have that unique voice that's aligned with your business goals. But in asset management, in financial services, in employee advocacy, the reality is different. And for us, most of our most of our colleagues are very deep experts and they do not have the time. Sometimes they do not even have the confidence nor the desire actually to be creators, and in that sense. So only a very handful of them actually do that on their own. And to be fair, that's okay. What's always been important to me is actually providing them with that infrastructure of enablement that can make any voice work at scale. There are also a few things that actually surprise me most, definitely. In terms of difference between these two words, there are a lot of similarities, but also very big differences. I think that for asset management, it's definitely the stakes and the speed. For us, even a very single unvetted statement can actually trigger regulatory enforcement. In some cases, even market sensitivity issues, and the compliance layer was something that I wasn't familiar with at all. And I very quickly realized it's not a nice to add, it's the foundation of similar programs for us in the industry, something I had to get acquainted with very quickly. And around speed is the sales cycle. That's completely different. That's night and day. A fashion influencer post will drive same-day purchases. In asset management, someone's post might start like a 6-12 months conversation that eventually might become a £50 million mandate, but you do not see the ROI the next day. You can see it in earned media value, as we were talking earlier, in pipeline quality, in brand lift, long-term trust, which is also why I think it's very important to the recognition loop. It's actually very important in giving that tangible feedback back to the employee base and build that psychological motivational structure, because otherwise not seeing immediate return on the activity, people wouldn't coming back.
It's really interesting you talk about when we look at the differences between influencer and kind of employee advocacy, is the way that you phrase that, of how it's really easy to find the experts internally within a business, but in the influencer marketing world, finding the experts, that's usually the hard bit of the work more than anything. Explaining how to post onto social media, you're never going to need to do to an influencer that's part of campaigns. That whole process is kind of built. They do that pretty much themselves. Maybe you provide some assets, but they're really, really good at that. And it's a really interesting kind of dichotomy between the two things, because as you say, it's a much slower process with employees. There's a lot more to kind of think about and go through, but you have these experts just like literally sat opposite you in the office. You don't have to go sourcing them. You know exactly who it is. It's getting them to the point of kind of sharing. It is such an interesting way to highlight that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And we're having this conversation on a daily basis. I literally just came out today from a meeting where people were like, but actually I don't feel confident doing it. I feel like it's something young people do, and it's not really something that my clients necessarily would appreciate. And it's also about reframing that mindset and the narrative around it. And that's why it's also very important to have tangible results to showcase to the business internally on why and how this actually works, because it does.
Quick one. If you've ever wondered how your employee advocacy efforts are actually performing and not just what you think is happening, Disseminate offers a free employee advocacy health check. All you have to do is provide your company name, and our team will pull real social data on how active your employees are, what impact it's having, and then how you stack up against your chosen competitors. So whether you're assessing the performance of your employee advocacy program or getting a benchmark for a future program, these will be the insights you can act on. The link's in the show notes.
If I could, Beatrice, while we're talking about reframing mindsets, obviously when you're in a regulated industry, you alluded to it previously, there's a lot of compliance concerns. And something that we've learned from speaking with previous guests on the podcast is that one of the most impactful things you can do is make your legal and compliance teams your best friends. So how did you bring both of those teams on the journey rather than having this risk of advocacy being positioned as a risk?
First, I should say, I still don't feel like we have managed to get away from framing advocacy not as risk. But the important thing is it's a risk that we co-manage together, that we do share with our compliance and legal teams together. I should also say I've been very lucky because I didn't build this program from scratch. So I didn't have to face the day one fires from compliance and legal myself. But, and I feel this is important, I've spent years anyway working side by side with our compliance teams in this role and in previous role. And I've asked what kept them up at night and what is that we could do to facilitate and understand what are the challenges they are facing as well. But the reality is you cannot actually stop people and colleagues from speaking, right? So you can give them, and you have to give them the guardrails to speak safely, and that's the model that we've scaled globally here at Aviva Investors.
If you don't have an outlet for this, like if you don't have an advocacy program, if you don't have some sort of guardrails for people to walk within, it's the Wild West, and people are going to post to LinkedIn. And I think this is, and I'd be interested to know if you've had this conversation. And this is a conversation I've had a few times over the years with, particularly in regulated industries, with compliance teams when we're talking through that, is these are still people's personal social media profiles. They can post whatever they want to them if they want to. They shouldn't disparage the company. They shouldn't say the wrong things. But ultimately, like it is theirs. It's their autonomy. How have you had those conversations internally?
Yeah, absolutely. So we agree with that. We maintain that our employees' personal profiles are ultimately theirs. The threshold and the difference for us lies when it comes to corporate related content. So and we follow the regulation with that. So the latest social media guidance, specifically in the UK, that have been released by FCA, but also other regulators in other markets, that's where the approach changes. So if the content that's been published, it's been about the company or they role, especially in regulated industries like us, it's just really important that we put some guardrails and safeguards in place. And that's the difference for compliance. So anything that's personal, anything that does not relate to what someone does in their day job, absolutely we encourage and we maintain that activity doesn't need to have additional review steps, can be done freely on the platform as such. The additional compliance controls come in place when it comes to content that's actually related to the products and capabilities and the activity that we carry out as a company.
Beatrice, I'd love to know, when it comes to onboarding people to your employee advocacy program, who participates? So do you have an ideal employee ambassador? What does that look like? And are you opening it up to everybody if not?
We are absolutely opening the program to everybody. I've worked on different programs over time, and each one of those was actually we were approaching the user base slightly differently. But currently, we're opening the program up to everyone. It's actually part of their onboarding schedule. So any new joiners will receive an email inviting them to learn more about the program. As I said, participation is absolutely voluntary. We do not mandate anyone to post, and we've seen a very good uptake. We onboard new people, new users on a monthly basis. Most of them are actually new joiners, but also people that see other colleagues actually start sharing the content and being vocal on the platform and willing to participate. We maintain that anyone that is interested into sharing externally what Aviva Investors does and the amazing things that they do as part of the day jobs can absolutely join the program with us. And we also make a point of actually all our senior leadership team being active as part of the program, including our CEO. And all our exco members, and we find that also it's very helpful in actually embedding culturally employee advocacy within the organization.
I'm a big fan of both of those things, to be honest with you. Just what you were saying about onboarding echoes what you were saying with your last point, about the fact that it relieves any apprehension that employees might have about whether or not they can post on social media. I think when you do it from day one, it says that it's not just okay, but it's just part of the culture here. It's what we do. But then, yeah, like you said, with having your senior leadership team visibly sharing and participating, again, it just drives that point home, I think. I'd love to know, though, so we obviously will know the benefits of posting on social media go both ways for both the employee and the company. The company obviously will see tremendous exposure off the back of it and many more things, but there's so many benefits for the employees, especially when we're talking about, consultants or sales teams, things along those, or roles along those lines, sorry. So how do you communicate that, Beatrice, that it's a two-way street and it's a mutually beneficial exercise?
Yeah, no, that's something that we always say actually. In basically the very beginning, so in every touch point, with our prospective and current employee advocacy base, it's really important that they actually do not necessarily see these just as supporting the company, just as advocating for the company, but it's actually a key engine in their own professional growth. So when we approach them, asking if they're interested into learning more about the program or getting onboarded or attend our social media training, we make a point that actually this is mutually beneficial, not just for Aviva Investors, but for their own growth itself. During training, we're very, very focused on training and support and providing resources. We always make sure that that's actually very much highlighted, and that they can actually understand what social media and sharing content on platforms can actually do for themselves, and how, especially within our sector, right? As I said, we work with experts and their niches, investment directors and fund managers. So how important it is for them to build that external digital personal not profile and strengthen their personal brand on the platform for themselves in the very first place. And the company would naturally benefit after that. So we focus on how we can help them rather than very much how they can help the company. And naturally, the business value follows.
Yeah, I think as a business, you're one of those, and particularly as a sector and an industry, one of those areas that really, really benefits from the kind of long tail effect of advocacy as well, which I'm sure from an attribution perspective isn't always the most fun. But compared to some of our clients, as an example, that software businesses, and it's very simple to your point, I guess a 7-day sales cycle, and actually they can attribute a lot of this stuff down. For asset management and that whole world, like it's reputation, it's trust, it's institutional relationships that happen over a really, really long time. Do you give any weight to the kind of defensive nature of all of this as well? You've got, as you said, 250 billion assets under management. Where we have that, we want to keep hold of all of those assets under management. If other people are talking expertise, that's going to lead people into a different direction.
100%. And I feel like you hit a very good point there. In asset management specifically, what we're selling is long-term trust. And that transparency of having our experts confident enough to actually speak their mind publicly, safely, and in a compliant way, for us is the new brand equity. And it's what really sets a company aside from their competitors. Another one is visibility. So relying exclusively on brand handles that makes us really actually mostly invisible to most of our audiences unless we pay or we activate through paid social media. And what's important is that through our employee advocates, through having our experts active on the platform, it's not just that we get more eyes, but actually we get the right eyes. So the people that they're connected with, they are already our clients, our prospects. So clients we want to retain, clients we want to dive deeper into their accounts, and prospect clients and members of those buying committees that actually are making the decision when it comes to placing assets with a manager versus another. And another point, I guess that's probably top of mind for many digital marketing managers right now, it's also the reputational side of things and future-proofing programs, and especially in the age of LLMs and AI-powered search. And when we know that it's actually individuals and experts are indexed in the AI responses. So yeah, just a few more thoughts there.
That's amazing. Yeah, I could speak on that for a while, actually. I feel like that's a whole episode in itself. I'm sure you've seen the data that's been released by Profound or SEMrush, I think, have been publishing studies recently on the number of citations that are appearing in LLM answers that are coming from employee posts from LinkedIn. I think initially there was speculation that a lot of those LinkedIn articles or those LinkedIn citations were articles. With reason, I could understand why that was the case, and they are being cited, but it's a huge percentage of employee posts now. So it's a real difference maker, and it's rapidly becoming an SEO and an AEO strategy on top of the various other things that it currently benefits. So while we're talking about success and I guess revenue impact, we were just discussing, you mentioned earlier that you were looking at influence pipeline and closed won opportunities, and Elliot said it's one of the hardest things to measure, especially in an industry like asset management. Sorry. But how did that shift happen? So from whatever it was in the early days to really getting under the hood and looking at what's generating revenue, but then most importantly for the listeners, how are you currently measuring that?
Yeah, sure. So we are currently measuring influence pipeline and closed won opportunities for all of our paid social media activities, and then looking at how we can actually translate that with our employee advocacy program. We have always actually been tracking and looking at conversions through from our social media posts shared by employee advocacy into translating into visits to our website, time spent, and fund in range documents downloaded, etc. And we had a single customer view built that actually tracks all of those digital engagements, including those that are coming from our social media posts shared by employees. put all of it together so that actually we can get that more complete pictures of how our clients and our prospects are discovering information about us, and how all the different touch points from a digital marketing perspective are actually influencing that journey that they're on, and ultimately how they're influencing the AUM that we are able to secure with them, and those one opportunities. That's after all what we are here aiming for. So definitely not a final process as it is. It's been a journey, and as you say, actually in B2B, especially within our sector, it's actually really hard, given the sales cycles are so long and articulated, and the touch points are so many. We are also currently looking at our program's success through a lens of cost efficiency. And the point earlier I made around earned media value, that's one of the metrics that we're actually reporting on upwards, up to our senior leadership team and ExCo team. So the equivalent advertising spend, that same reach and same level of engagement we would have needed in order to get to that level. Which is said, it's incredible. It's over $500,000. It's higher than our paid social media advertising budget. What I can say as well is that what we're seeing is that the individuals that we are engaging through our employee advocacy activity, are they liking, commenting, or clicking on through our social media posts to actually land onto our websites, tend to be actually warmer leads and more qualified, tend to spend more time on our websites, tend to perform more actions. That actually shows us that our employees are really connected to the right people in the right mindset, and they are actually engaging with them at the right stage of the journey when they are actually ready to go deeper into the discovery process.
Beatrice, it wouldn't be a podcast in 2026, or frankly, whenever you're listening to this in the future, because it's definitely still going to be a relevant topic. But I have to ask you about AI. So something that is a hot topic, and for many people a point of contention at the moment, is the use of AI within employee advocacy programs. So we've spoken with a number of people about this, but I'd love to get your take on it. So I guess the best place to start is just the question: are you using AI to support your program currently?
Yeah, sure. So sometimes people feel a little bit surprised when I say, well, actually, we've been using AI for quite some time, but at least as part of our program. Maybe it wasn't necessarily generative AI, but we have been using artificial intelligence. We actually use artificial intelligence within the compliance process as well. So we have a rating system, and we automatically rate alerts or social media posts that might actually contain information to be reviewed, or content to be reviewed by our compliance team, either red, amber, or green, based on the level of risk that content could represent. So that's a use of AI. We've used AI for our compliance team also to review video content, for example, and to flag within video content without the need to actually watch through the full video, those moments where high level risk might have been included. And we've also used AI to surface content, relevant content to our employee advocates, to our ambassadors internally, content that the algorithm will predict that your audience would necessarily might engage more with. In terms of Gen AI specifically, we are currently been testing social media copy content generation with generative AI platforms. It's not been released we haven't completed the testing pilot as of yet. We are on this journey alongside our internal teams. I'm not gonna lie, it's not been easy to get even the testing for this approved internally. There are of course a lot of guardrails in place and a lot of nervousness about utilizing AI platforms to generate external content. But we are on this journey with the other teams, and we're currently testing it. And in the future, we hope to actually be able to allow for our ambassadors to utilize generative AI posting functionality within the program itself, really to allow for variations in social media content production, efficiencies as well. Most of the content that's currently provided to our employee advocates really is produced by a small team within our marketing function. So definitely there's the potential there to expand this and to make it more efficient from a timing and resourcing perspective, and to offer them more and more variety, and also to help with the blank page syndrome, right? So people might not necessarily feel like confident about sharing or creating their own content necessarily. So I'm seeing this also as a way to help them doing so.
Well, Beatrice, I've got one final question for you today. I'm sure people will have lots of takeaways from everything we've already discussed, but if you could give one piece of advice to marketers trying to get employee advocacy off the ground within a regulated company, what would it be?
Yeah, definitely. I would say definitely, and we've said that across a number of different parts of this, but make sure that you are collaborating with your teams on internal teams, so your compliance team, your legal teams. You do not have to take this on alone by yourself. Just make sure that actually from the very beginning, the question is not about, it's not about do we do this or not. It's actually about how can we do this in a safe and in compliant manner, and they will come along in the journey with you. So whether it's about, as I say, co-creating a social media policy together, putting those non-negotiables on the table, but actually making sure that internal teams feel heard in the very first place, and actually you can work together to define what is safe, and then start from where the small wins are, right? So as I said, in B2B and in financial services or asset management, not everyone will become an ambassadors, and that's absolutely fine. Just try and look for those pockets of experts and individuals in the team that might already be doing it on the side, and actually they can become your very first champions of this, because they actually get it, and they will help you with the narrative around how important it is to be active on social media as part of employees of a regulated company, and they will get all the other teams and their colleagues, of course, those that are interested, rallied behind them.
Fantastic advice. I think whether you're working in a regulated industry or not, I think that's something that something you can carry through if you're trying to get an employee advocacy program off the ground. So, Beatrice, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been an absolute pleasure. I hope it won't be the last time, actually. I'm sure in a year's time, those numbers are going to have doubled again, and we'll be seeing and hearing about much more success down the road. For the listeners, we will leave any resources that might be relevant to the conversations we've discussed in the show notes. But Beatrice, thank you again. Absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll see you in a week.